Hey Citylight, this is Pastor Mike, and even after almost 2 years as a pastor at Citylight, I have to confess I'm still getting used to that title. We're starting a series of videos that we're sending out to our covenant members. We're not keeping any secrets here just to you guys, but we realize that there's things that we may want to say directly to our members that just wouldn't be of interest to a broader audience that we might have there on a Sunday morning. And one of those things is our membership covenant. So the first set of videos we're doing are going to focus on explaining aspects of our membership covenant and what it means for us as a church to be committed to this covenant. There'll be videos on all kinds of other things coming out, updates on the life of the church, direction that we may be heading in the future, but that's where we're kind of going to start. Before we get into the details of our covenant, today I want to explore the question of why we even have a membership covenant. I mean, I have to admit, it feels a bit formal, a bit stuffy. Even if you can get behind the idea of covenant membership, why not just sign up somewhere and say, hey, I'm in? Why have this agreement that you have to initial and sign on a piece of paper? Well, to answer that question, I want to start by defining what a covenant is. A covenant is a mutual agreement to commit to something with accountability. And those are probably some more words that don't give you warm fuzzies on the side: commitment and accountability. And the reason we tend to bristle at those is because they are such a constraint on our freedom. But I want to suggest to you that making commitments that we are accountable to is actually essential to our long-term joy. And I bet that you've actually experienced that in small ways in your life. For example, when I was in college, I was in the first time in my life this situation where I had access to all-you-can-eat food at the dining commons, and at the same time, no one forcing me to exercise. So by the time I was a junior, I was not in great shape, or unhealthy to say the least. And I enjoyed it. I got to eat whatever I wanted, and I never had to work out when I didn't want to. And in that sense, I was free, right? I was always getting to do what I wanted to do. But in another sense, I was slowly dying, right? My body was actually getting less and less healthy. As I realized this, I did what many of you have probably tried at some point in your life. I made a commitment. I grabbed a friend and said, hey man, you and me, we're going to go to the gym 3 days a week. Here's when we're going to do it. We're going to play some basketball while we're there. And sure enough, we started doing it. I didn't say to him, hey, let's go to the gym when I feel like it, because I know that the day's going to come and I'm not going to feel like it. So we went, and I lost some weight, started being able to play basketball for more than 5 minutes without having to sub out. It actually did create some joy. But what happened next is probably going to be no surprise to you, right? One week comes by and the work piles up, and I say, hey man, I can't today. The next day, he's got something going on, he cancels, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't want to go by myself, that would be weird, and so we'll cancel that too. And another week goes by, and all of a sudden, we're not doing it anymore. We were committed, but we didn't actually have any accountability. See, without accountability, I was still subject to the whims of my own desires. And all my desires can tell me to do is what I want to do. The problem is they can't tell me what I ought to do, or what actually would be the best thing for me in the long run. In fact, in the case of exercise and eating right, my desires often tell me the opposite of the thing that will contribute to my long-term joy. Now, when it comes to eating and exercise, maybe that's not that big of a deal. There's more to life than being healthy. But many times we operate the same way in our relationships. We don't want to commit ourselves to certain people for fear that the cost of loving them may at some point exceed the benefits that we're getting out of the relationship. What if the church changes? What if I change and this church no longer suits my needs? What if a better church community comes along that more fits what I'm looking for? We'd rather keep our options open and not tie ourselves down. Or perhaps we're willing to commit, but to stop short of actually being accountable. And so we say things like, I know this is my church home, but I don't need a piece of paper or any kind of public declaration to kind of make that official. We end up saying, I'm committed here as long as I still want to be. But you see, apart from a commitment that we're actually accountable to, we're still at the whim of our own desires. And the reality is, my desires, I know myself, my desires will sometimes tell me not to love, not to move towards people that I don't want to be around, not to engage in difficult relationships or have that hard conversation, or to continue coming to things and being present with people when I start to get to know them better, and when my flaws start to come out and when their flaws start to come out. So again, if I don't commit myself, if I don't make myself accountable, I can hold on and get what I want. But I'll never end up loving anyone more than I love myself. I'll never end up being able to say no to my own desires, because I'm committed to loving God and loving other people. And that's actually the opposite of joy. But just look at how God has loved us. See, he actually didn't have to love us. In fact, there were things in us that might necessitate an opposite reaction from God. Like we deserve his judgment, we deserve his justice. And yet instead, what does he do? He makes a covenant with us. I want to show you this in Hebrews chapter 8, verses 8 through 10. It says, "Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will establish a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah." And this is the covenant that we now participate in. "Not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. For they did not continue in my covenant, and so I showed no concern for them, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law into their minds and write them on their hearts. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall not teach each one his neighbor and each one his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest. For I will be merciful toward their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more." The center of that covenant promise is a commitment to love. He says, I will be their God, and they will be my people. Whatever the cost, even when they sin against me, he says, I will be merciful toward their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. And we know what that cost was. We know the cost for God to forgive our sins was sending his own son to pay for them on the cross. He's essentially held himself accountable to love us by making the promise and by signing it with the blood of his son. He will be your God, and you will be his people. Now, as that sinks into you, what it does is it creates a new love, a new desire that overcomes the desire to always get what we want or to always have the option to get out. It creates in us a desire to love him and to reflect his love to other people. Now, if you know that's what you want most, if I know that's what I want most in my life, how can I make sure that's the thing I actually pursue even when I don't feel like it? I need a commitment with accountability. I need a covenant. And that is why we have a membership covenant. It's a way of saying to God and to one another, this is the life I commit to live with these people. And I will continue living in that way, even when I don't feel like it. In fact, I want you all to hold me accountable to it, because love for God and people is way too important to me for me to leave it to the whims of my own desires. Our covenant even specifies what that love for God and love for people will look like. So it says things like, I am going to invest in the growth of other Christians and not wait to see if I still want to. It's saying I'm going to regularly attend our Sunday gatherings and my particular city group and not wait till that day and see if I feel like doing it. I'm going to choose to have the hard conversations with people, to engage in relationships with them, rather than waiting to see if I still want to in the future. You're saying ahead of time, this is how I will act, even though I don't know what the future holds. Even when we fail to live up to the terms of this covenant, God does not fail. He is your God and we are his people. And because he has covenanted with us, that's the most fundamental reason that we make a covenant with one another.